First of all, who am I? Just a short introduction. Klaus Kirr, my name. I'm actually partner at Porsche Consulting with a vast experience in the automotive industry, starting from Daimler, then went to Rolls-Royce and BMW, then I went to VW and Audi, before I then turned to Porsche and then to Porsche Consulting. So basically, a lot of experience in the automotive industry, and as you discussed previously, the ELVR is one of the major topics we have currently in regards to the circular economy. A few words to Porsche Consulting. Basically, we are 100% subsidy of Porsche, basically founded when Porsche was close to the bankruptcy, and that was the reason why the Porsche Consulting was founded. If you read the news carefully, you might see some similarities to nowadays, but we don't discuss that right now. Basically, we have about 1,000 people, and with an average age of business experience of 10 years in the series. So what is our picture on the circular economy right now? Currently, we do have the narrative that a company that is not taking circular economy seriously won't be successful in the 2030s. There are several reasons why that is, and we will explain it later on. But the major task is for today to give you what we think are the 3 key points for the automotive industry to be successful. The first point is, of course, to secure the supply of post-consumer recyclates, but also secure the supply and access towards waste to do that. Second point is, of course, to promote new industries. We all know that the closed loop is not an existing industry right now, so there needs to be a lot of investment done to get this facilitated and scaled up. And the last point, which is very critical, is to have a clear understanding of what the full car exploitation means. So what is exactly the value of a car if you've taken the car back and trying to do something with it? Whether it is in a repair, whether it is in a refurbishment or remanufacturing or a recycling. So that is the entire picture, and as you can see, it's developed around an ecosystem, and in the core we discuss about a virtual hub. It's not necessarily to be a physical hub, but we're trying to create the best out of the R strategies a company can actually do. So in that field you see several points here, but the most crucial point is, of course, at the left-hand side, the access point towards where do I have the access towards the cars, and where can I get the facilitation towards my virtual hub in order to facilitate it to the R strategies, which are, if it's working, in the middle here embedded. In that case, we do have, of course, the entire environment and seeing what the value is, but we also need to facilitate our ecosystem towards a functioning level. So, speaking about that, we do face some changes within the regulation and as well within the plastic industry. So the major point, what you can see here, is basically a very nice and beautiful correlation between the virgin plastics as well as the secondary plastics, and of course the correlation towards crude oils and naphtha. You can see that pretty well that there is a strong correlation towards the prices so far. That has been the old thing. What we do see now is, of course, that we have some discussions going on about the ELVR, speaking about, okay, what will be the quotas, what is required in the future. And we do see that there are several versions out there, and it will be some quota somehow, where we will decide what the entire challenge will be in the next days. And hopefully we'll have there the guidance towards the entire strategy. But we also see that we have several indicators that many companies are interested in circular economy, but we also see on the right-hand side that there are some bankruptcy of recycling companies that are influencing the supply tremendously. So what we are trying to do there was actually with tech part as well as the KI group and the Technical University of Munich to evaluate a mechanism on how to predict the post-consumer recyclate prices in the future, even though they're currently in a strong correlation with the virgin prices. But the point is, if you take it quite simple, it's just about the supply, it's about the demand, and that will equal the price. Pretty simple. But it's not that simple, so you need to look at it quite closely. What is the reason what we are facing? And the tiny point in this slide is not big and bold, it's just the terms of price elasticity. So having those regulation up and running, there's a required quota of post-consumer recyclates in a car, and that will lower the elasticity lower than zero. That means we don't have any more that price and demand. Basically, some OEMs need to have those quota fulfilled to bring their products to the market. And that has a tremendous influence on the entire price building. What we have done there was basically in 3 scenarios, checking what the entire assumption is, checking what the supply is, as well as what the demand is, and trying to forecast in 3 different scenarios what can be an outcome for the 5 most typical plastics where we had very strong and valid data present. So the major point then is basically what you can see, the PET as a vast commodity is probably not affected that much by the price increase. But we do have other components and recyclates that are heavily, especially affected by the entire ELV regulation in regards to the demand as well as the supply. So what are basically the levers? We do have, of course, 2 different, let's say, requirements. The one hand is the closed loop, or the open loop, and the one is the other one is the closed loop. So speaking about the open loop, the major task is here, what many companies don't know, that we're looking at the very strong demand in 2040 of recyclates coming from an open loop in the entire European Union. We're speaking about almost 800 million tons, which are applicable in 2040. That is a vast amount of plastics or plastic recyclates we are trying to get into the cars. So that is a high amount, and every company can now decide how they deal with it. They can, on the one hand side, say, okay, we don't safeguard anything, and we'll leave it open to the market, which be the lower right part, or they probably go to the upper left and saying, okay, we're trying to safeguard as much as possible and trying to get there everything done. In between that, there is a sweet spot every company has to define towards the purchasing laws and orders and trying to get those tasks really done in order with cooperation with partnerships or with other companies and sourcing it directly. The other point then is, of course, the closed loop, which is a more critical one because that is currently not applicable in a vast and scaled majority. So we have 6 main levers. The first point then is, of course, once again in the closed loop, how do we proceed with the entire access to the vehicles? Currently, we don't see enough volume in the European Union unless the ELVR is implemented and companies are working towards this, as well as the government. That is then an option which can increase the path towards more end-of-life for vehicles in Europe. The entire market won't grow in Europe. The growth rate is for the next 10 years about 1%, which is almost nothing. So there won't be any more cars coming to the market. So we really need to work heavily on how we get access to the existing cars, to the fleet on the street, and get them then back. Then the other point is then, of course, if we have the cars in our hand, we have a very critical point there, which is the control point of how we dismantle the cars. If any company has not an access to that critical point, how those cars are being dismantled, they won't have access to the specific parts, the parts that are quite crucial to increase the share of closed-loop materials, and they will probably lose the entire effect. So that is a very critical point every company has to be aware of and be proactive so that they have the access to those critical points. The third point then is of course to decide what parts are going to be dismantled towards their value. And that is then the critical point. If you can see here the different levels, we have minimum is the current ELV, the advanced is the upcoming ELVR, the maximum is the amount of cars we highly encourage the companies to dismantle because they have a value whether you recycle them or not. The value, especially on the reuse parts market, is even more and higher than the recycled value. So you need to be quite keen on what is the value of those parts, because not every part will end up in the recycling. If we talk about circular economy, it's even more effective to get them into reuse or remanufacturing. So speaking about that, you need to be aware that an average ICE car consists out of 270 kilogram of plastics. And we have a cascade to the efficiency, which is currently obvious. So within the first bucket, you see 139 kilos, which are currently not accessible for the recycling yet, because they're basically too complicated. They are too much of ingredients. Then we have 22 kilos, which are tiny parts embedded in the engine and the gearbox. They are too small to really get access to it. And then you will end up with a feedstock of 108 kilos of plastic, which you can then run through the recycling. And out of these 180 kilos, you will get up about 55 kilos to the current efficiency within the recycling industry. So we have lots of losses within the entire process, speaking about the mechanical recycling, and we need to be aware of it and trying to work pretty hard to get towards the 108 at least for the mechanical recycling, and we need to talk about advanced recycling to foster the 139 kilos within the second column. The point there, how we analyze this, is with a deep dive based on the different materials, and you can see here for the current panel, the center console, that it consists out of 7.2 kilogram of plastic, and we have a drill down on what is embedded in such a component. You see, it's quite difficult. Lots of materials are in it, and you need to be aware about the complexity, which is, I guess, for all of you quite obvious. The other part, which many companies elaborate, is the bumper, for instance, which is the part many trying to have a close loop on, but this is also not trivial, and you need to be quite aware of. First of all, it's a quite good part, a golden part in terms of the amount of weight. You get 10.4 kilos, but still you have huge components in there, basically the PP or ABS, and then you have to try to be aware of the other components. The major point then for the mechanical recycling as well is then to try to increase the entire efficiency. If you go through it, you need to foster it with further technologies to even increase the entire efficiency. Basically, you need to have a quite good washing. Of course, the hot washing is quite crucial there. Then, of course, the swim sink should be embedded as well as the zigzag, of course, to increase the entire share of proper material. But getting away from the mechanical recycling, you need to, of course, encourage as well the advanced recycling. There are three major technologies: the solvolysis, the pyrolysis, as well as the gasification. I think the gasification was displayed 2 sessions beforehand with the example that BASF presented. But there are others, and they are scalable and present. The other ones are technically there, but not yet in a scale so that we can really foster it and use it as technology for such a component. So speaking about all the recycling, that is the one hand side, but we also need to speak about the quality on the other side. So dividing a car in two axles, basically you have the one axle which is visible and non-visible, and you have an axle about the parts that are security, that rely on the security, and the ones that are uncritical. If we would like to optimize the post-consumer recyclate quota in our cars, we need to discuss once again which level of quality for the client is acceptable and which one is, let's say, an heritage figure we're using since decade, but with no further customer benefit. If we are able to touch that, we are able to increase the PCR share tremendously within our cars. If we don't touch it, we need very high technologies to remain or maintain the current quality, and we will lose a lot of potential to even increase the entire share. So if we would like to increase the share, there's like a simple algorithm most of you probably have embedded in your companies. It's basically an 8-step approach on how to go through each part and trying to start from the components, from the materials, and then trying to really see what the entire potential is for those parts and have an index up and running so the entire car is measurable and we have a clear indication on what the entire car is possible of. So summarizing it once again, first of all, we really need to have the access to the raw materials. In that case, I'm speaking about the end-of-life vehicles as well as the waste out of the municipal system. Secondly, we really need to foster and encourage the closed-loop economy because this is currently not present, not enough present, and not scaled yet. And we need to foster this entire economy in order to reach more out of the entire system. The last point is very crucial. We need to be aware of what the value of the car is, and especially what each component value has. So a component is not the best value when it is recycled. The best value is then in the reuse, in the reman, or in the refurbishment. And if we are aware of it, we have a clear understanding on what our real feedstock of an end-of-life vehicle is. And that gives us the transparency on what we can actually do in the future and what we have to do in order for the market and transfer all of you. Speaking about that, I think I have 1 minute left, so I'm quite good in the time. I'm not sure if questions are allowed, if that is part of the entire session or not.
Yes, definitely. So we've got 2 minutes for questions. Are there any? Feel free.